Good evening, everybody, and Happy New Year, because I can say that once and then move on. It's good to be back and getting into a bit of a rhythm, or we hope to establish a rhythm for the next few months on the TTN Norfolk Meetup. Some exciting things have been happening across the latter part of last year and the early part of 2019. In that, Norfolk County Council have made pretty good progress in rolling out their initial networks. So as of this week, we now have new gateways in Yarmouth being added to the existing community gateways that we had already deployed there. We've got obviously the gateways on the County Hall and at the Millennium Library. And you can see that the coverage is nicely overlapping between those two areas and sets of gateways. And thank you everybody for running around doing the mapping that you've been doing, because that has given NCC a whole series of immediate feedback and PR. What's really interesting and important just to note, and hence the call to action that we'll have at the end of this meetup, and that is that they have, NCC and Suffolk County Council have jointly submitted a bid for funding.
With the new Anglia LEP as well.
Correct, with the new Anglia LEP getting in there. So we could be on the cusp of literally hundreds of gateways being deployed in Norfolk and Suffolk. Okay, and the vision there is quite literally two, seamless smart counties, sharing and working in the same strategy. So I think that's pretty exciting, and all of that, if you like, that vision of theirs has come from us doing the legwork initially, doing demonstration products, getting out there and showing those, like at the Norfolk show last year, and supporting, the NCC team as they've been trying to do their various deployments and things around. And now, with our newly formed startup Unitech there in the corner, actually getting some real things out literally on the road, with Norfolk County Council. So we'll get Mike to tell us more about that as we move through. The most recent additions, literally as of last week, Swatham and then Kings Lynn has just come live. TTN Mapper seems to be having some challenges, so we're not seeing map data come through from the Kings Lynn piece that Emily's done. But those two are live. And you might notice some red triangles there. They are the next series of gateways that Norfolk County Council are intending to deploy. So they're mainly focusing along the A11 and the A47 corridor. And they're aiming for Thetford, right on the Norfolk-Suffolk border. And then they've got one in Dereham, and they're talking about Gressenhall. And I think Gressenhall's there, or is Gressenhall further? No, it is there, yes. It was surprisingly close. So I imagine they've gone to Dereham first with the idea that if it doesn't reach, they'll stick one in Gressenhall for the Rivers project as well. So, with a bit of luck, we'll be getting to, some good size coverage in these areas. And then we'll be starting to look like we've almost got a third of the county with broad coverage. So their strategy, the Norfolk County Council strategy, is quite literally to focus along the A11, A47 corridors and then start filling in the gaps, which is fantastic, particularly if they get this funding piece. So the call to action, really, to all of us, is to actually come up with, our project ideas and get them real to the point that we can demonstrate that we're out there rolling. And we've got a variety of things. The urban tracker piece, is a small device that kind of works. Dan's got some interesting circuitry that could make it as small as it could get. We've got a variety of different monitoring pieces, from a river level piece that we could do, to actually nitrate soil analysis that I've still kept cooking with the John Innes Institute. And they haven't made much progress. So I actually talking to Marco today about, getting on with it. They had some challenges, but in that they've received some more funding for more work on their own nitrate probes, which they've been creating to lower the cost of analysis. And in fact, he's asked about whether we've got coverage in Barbara And it's a kind of maybe, could have, and because he's actually got a site to instrument out there. So one of the certain mapping tasks for us is to drive by their site and actually see whether they're getting coverage, because then we'll have a proper research park actually using this in their own analysis to solve a very expensive problem, and one that's hugely pertinent to the area for agritech. So it's a really cool little project. They don't have a lot of electronics expertise in this space, so it's something that we can definitely step up and help with, and see them make some progress on that. So that's really the summary of things. I'm really keen that we get out doing some real projects and start tweeting about those, because it builds a body of evidence that makes people realise that we're doing stuff, and that gets fed back naturally into a number of places. So not only are the county council guys resharing it, and we've got quite a good following in terms of the Twitter range, but the cabinet office people, the commercial services people are watching as well, following on from a presentation I gave them last year around LoRaWAN and the opportunities for smart city. So all of these things are quite interesting. In fact, I've got another little nugget that is actually really all of us actually should sit with a dirty great smile on our faces when you hear this. Okay, so I think it's Jeff Connell who's described as a CTO. So one of my senior management was in a meeting with a government minister, and he described the CTO of Norfolk County Council. And the guy that I used to work for was fully aware of what we've been doing, because I presented on it internally at Microsoft. Anyway, he sat there and Jeff replayed this whole community-led innovation that Norfolk was doing to this minister, and this government minister was lapping it up and saying it was a terrific thing, a terrific example. So, I mean, on a not so terribly auspicious government day, let's actually say that it's kind of cool that we are influencing, some technology focused parts of the government just by the work we're doing here. So, I think that's just amazing. And we should all feel really, proud about that, but also, let's use that, that feeling of pride to actually really crack on and deliver some projects. From my own perspective, I've been doing work around crossover CPUs being able to run, neural networks, so convolutional neural networks predominantly for image analysis. And the idea is that these devices can run all of this, on a small chip, and then they're just sending the metadata of what they've observed back. So they're not shipping images, they're not shipping video, there's no China social credit system going on, but it can observe a street scene and it can count vehicles, and catalogue vehicle volumes. And that's interesting information. And basically, because it's a generic capability to run CNNs, it's what do we need to count? What do we want to count? There's potentially a wide sort of range of options there that actually inexpensive visual devices doing this, is the cheaper route of delivering some sensor solutions. Obviously, the downside is power, and we need to have some sort of power piece. But again, looking at whole cities' aspirations with instrumenting 5,000 street lamps. If we are talking street lamps and being able to take a power supply from a street lamp, that power problem is potentially solved. Now, one other thing that I'm following up is I was working in the Shard just before Christmas on a facilities management LoRaWAN smart building instrumentation project, and one of the sensor providers had what he described as millimeter radar, and I haven't really seen this thing before, but it's quite an established chipset. They had a nice sensor like this. It gets literally buried into the walls of prison cells because it can detect whether people are breathing at distance. It can be applied in a whole series of ways. They were using it in a connected workspace scenario to actually count people and observe people. But these things have huge amounts of applicability, from the perspective of even observing traffic flow. So I'm hoping to obtain one of those and see whether we can do some creative software, because they've already got the hardware, so it's a software piece that's interesting. I'm not a web dev, and there are plenty of skilled web devs going, but what I just wanted to sort of say, rather than necessarily show this, because it doesn't really show a lot, but the NCC guys have said, hey, we need a dashboard that shows what's happening where. So I was looking at the REST API for the account server, but I noticed in doing so that there's actually a undocumented API which is open, which gets you, well, there's a variety of ways you can use it, but one is give it a lat long and a distance, and it will tell you every gateway stat within that. And that's what I've just used here, because the important thing is, it could just be a public gateway, because there's no need to sign in, no need to have an account. And it just gives you the potential location, if it's public, of the gateway, but also the gateway name and when it was last seen. So if you maintain a history of what gateways you've seen, then you know when the gateway goes missing. But also, if it's in your list, the last seen, if it's greater than 3 minutes, it's fallen off the air. And this is just what they want. So this little very small bit of dubious code sorts out the crap JSON implementation they're doing, because it's not JSON, it's sort of like 95% JSON and then isn't. So I had to just solve that. But anyway, having done that, I've now got a data feed of proper JSON, which shows it, but I need somebody else to do the front endy kind of thing. So yeah, so it just needs to be, there's a couple of steps. One is to maintain the file somewhere, and I hadn't thought of a safe place to put it. And then one is just the UI. But the UI, I'm kind of thinking, could be an advertising point for the public. If we can host it somewhere appropriately, we can just be pointing people, saying, see how you're,
Put it on the Digital East Anglia website.
Could do, absolutely.
Asset, because I'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah. So anyway, that's just one thing. So that's one little project. If we could do it for NCC, it's a thing that comes directly back. They've got no app dev. Well, they had no app dev when I spoke to them last year, and they had sort of an ambition, but I don't think they've realised it yet. So anything around this space, they need devs to write code. So if we can just do some bits like that and throw it in already funded places, or that they've got an Azure subscription, so we can throw it in their Azure subscription and they'll host it. So that's the sort of thing that we can do.
And
so
wrap it up and make it deployable to front end for web.
Well, I think there are some German TTN groups that have done similar things. When I tried to reuse their code, it was all a bit naff, in that it only ever sent alerts to Slack groups and things like that, and these guys just want a visualization. I mean, you can imagine from Kurt's perspective, Kurt's from the NCC, if you're not familiar, they've got an innovation lab in a room, in there, and they really would like a screen which, when they're talking about all the sensors and all the great things that they've got going on, they can point to the screen and there's the live gateways across Norfolk, and Norfolk and Suffolk. I mean, that would just be awesome, right? So, we need to facilitate some of those things. So,
well, we can talk about that.
Yeah. So I think what, from this point of view, it would be great now to have a bit of a brainstorm about projects that you've got either up your sleeves or on your mind, and just see what we could actually build and do proof of concepts for. So, there are lots of challenges around certification, the liabilities of getting things out. And Mike can share a bit of your solution, how you've done that and things like that for everybody to understand. But for most of us that don't have our own company, that's a challenge. So my vision is more about being able to, build something and photo document it so it's tweetable and also deliverable in a nice little A4 single side or something of what it does, how it works, things like that. Because all of that is marketing material. The NCC people can reuse it, can show it. They might want to take it further. But from my perspective, most of the fun is building something new and then letting somebody else do the to production bit of it.